Is this a sign he's about to flip? Also breaking, the Secretary of State claiming the North Korea agreement includes the word verifiable. What agreement is he looking at? And a top Democrat accusing Jeff Sessions of wanting, quote, black people to be in the back of the bus again. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, flipping at any moment. CNN learning that Trump's allies are afraid tonight that the president's longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, who is under criminal investigation, could be about to flip on his boss. One man close to Trump says Cohen is, quote, facing the end of a barrel. Another person close to the president says he has, quote, got to be extremely worried, adding, quote, who the bleep knows what Michael Cohen did all those years. Adding to the fears about what Cohen actually knows, and if he's about to turn on his longtime boss and let it all spill out, Cohen has now cut ties with his legal team. The very team that has been by his side through the months-long criminal investigation, including the FBI raid on Cohen's home and office. According to our sources, one reason for this shakeup is over money. Cohen apparently is running out of it, and he doesn't want to spend his entire savings on legal fees. That's confusing, though, because this is the same man who has been staying at a luxury Manhattan hotel where suites go for $1,000 a night. Right now, we understand he's in a three-room suite of some sort. He's been staying at this hotel since at least April 9th, so you can do the math. So that's tens of thousands of dollars, possibly, since the FBI raided his home. So if money is an issue, well, you get the point. CNN is also learning Cohen met with multiple potential new lawyers today. One source telling us that Cohen would not be shocked to be indicted. But we are also told Cohen is not yet met with prosecutors to speak about a potential deal to flip. And if he does ask for a deal in exchange for a lighter sentence, basically he cooperates and gets a lighter sentence, he needs lawyers who know the people investigating him, because the rest of his life is on the line. After all, while Cohen has not been charged, his longtime business partner has already flipped. The Russian immigrant nicknamed the Taxi King, agreeing to cooperate in exchange for avoiding a possible 100-year prison sentence. So what can Cohen offer on Trump? There are only a very few people who actually know the answer and know what Cohen was doing on behalf of Trump and his family for years. One person who does know is Trump himself. And while he sometimes defends Cohen, he's also tried very clearly to distance himself from his longtime fixer.
Let me just tell you that Michael is in business. He's really a businessman, a fairly big business as I understand it. I don't know his business, but this doesn't have to do with me. Michael is a businessman. He's got a business. He also practices law.
Mr. President, how much of your legal work was handled by Michael Cohen?
Well, as a percentage of my overall legal work, a tiny, tiny little fraction. But Michael would represent me and represent me on some things.
A tiny, tiny little fraction. That's certainly not what Cohen has claimed. Of course, Cohen, as we all now know, negotiated the hush payment to Stormy Daniels, among other things. Evan Perez is out front in Washington. And Evan, a lot of concern tonight from Team Trump that this legal change could signal Cohen is about to flip. Some of them very worried.
They certainly are, Aaron. That's certainly what we heard today from people, that they weren't sure what exactly was at work here today. But at least part of this appears to be that Michael Cohen and his legal team were facing a deadline on Friday to complete the review of documents that were taken in that FBI raid just a couple of months ago. And so the end of that review is now on Friday. Hundreds of thousands of pages of documents have been reviewed by his legal team. And as you mentioned, that costs a lot of money. And it was an opportunity to change teams going forward. Now, whether or not this means he's going to strike a deal, whether or not the prosecutors even want a deal with Michael Cohen, because from the legal papers, it's clear that they believe they have plenty of evidence against him. We don't know, but we'll see certainly in the coming days whether that change in legal teams brings a deal or not.
So, Evan, you've been reporting that, and this news about Cohen, is coming just as a euphoric post-Korea summit. Trump is working the phones, calling his lawyers, plotting his next move when it comes to the Russia investigation. And you have some new reporting on that tonight from Trump's legal team.
That's right. So on his way back from Singapore, we're told that the president got on the phone with his legal team for the first time in quite a while, actually, because they had tried not to bother him before the Korea summit, and he started plotting his next move. Now, as you know, Aaron, the special counsel has asked for a voluntary interview with the president. The president seems inclined that he keeps telling his lawyers that he wants to do it. They don't think it's such a great idea. So what we expect in the next couple of days, they're going to get together, they're going to try to figure out whether this is a way forward, and then perhaps meet with the special counsel Mueller in the week or so to see whether or not they can make a deal. Keep in mind, obviously, that if he doesn't make a deal, the special counsel is still threatening to issue a subpoena.
All right. Thank you very much. Evan Perez, all that reporting. And out front now, Harry Sandick, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Laura Coates, former federal prosecutor, and Patrick Healy, political editor for the New York Times. Thanks to all. Harry, you heard Evan's reporting.
Yep.
Trump allies are afraid Cohen could flip at any moment. Some of them are very afraid. One of them said, looking at the end of a barrel, that this could be imminent. Is there a deadline on him flipping?
There's probably no deadline on him flipping, but there's a difference between whether you cooperate before indictment or after indictment, assuming that he is to be indicted. It's usually considered better to cooperate before indictment. That way you plead guilty to an information. It's a little bit less stressful than actually being indicted, having to be arraigned on that, coming to court, and then hoping to cooperate after that. So if we assume that the government had tremendous evidence to get the search warrant, we can also assume they have enough evidence to indict him.
And so this is something that he would be then doing very imminent would be fair.
Yeah, conceivably the next few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks maybe.
So Laura, Cohen obviously, is clearly afraid here, right? He's sources telling CNN he's fully aware at this point that he could be indicted. He expects it. When you're facing what he might be facing, there's reason, right, for Team Trump to be worried he could flip, right? The guy who is his longtime partner is cooperating to avoid a 100-year possible prison term if he had been convicted. We don't know what the situation could be for Cohen if he's charged, but there is real risk here, right, that he could flip.
There is real risk. Who he will flip on is the greatest question. He has a number of associates outside of Donald Trump. It may not be they're looking to have him flip on the President of the United States or even with his time before then. What's equally possible here as well is a stall tactic. Remember, he knows what's ahead of him, Aaron. He knows that it takes a counsel time to get up to speed in order to know what's in those documents and to advance certain theories. As of a couple of days ago, they'd only been able to review a third of all of those documents for attorney-client privilege. If he were to delay in terms of who his attorneys were, he'd have more time for that, and also more time perhaps to get the word out and wait for those smoke signals from the President of the United States if he actually is in fear. It's also equally possible here, though, Aaron, as my colleague just talked about, that the deadline he's worried against, his own finances may be an issue, but the government knows that its own resources are at stake here, and the less amount of money they have to spend and expend to have a grand jury indictment process or other things, or have that special prosecutor looking at his issues, they want to have an incentive for him to plea early, but it's not clear that the person who's the ultimate target will be Donald Trump. It may be somebody else.
Right. These are the big questions. Patrick, when it comes to Trump, Cohen, of course, has talked repeatedly about his loyalty to his boss. Here he is.
I will use my legal skills within which to protect Mr. Trump to the best of my ability.
I'll do anything to protect Mr. Trump. I'm obviously very loyal and very dedicated to Mr. Trump.
Look, here's the reality. People who talk to Cohen, he will flip to protect his family, if that's what it comes to save decades in prison. As I've said before, almost anybody would. Trump's allies don't seem to know what Cohen knows about Trump. That seems to be the most fascinating thing here. Trump may know.
Trump may have his own recollection of it, but as we know, Aaron, that can be totally different than what's actually in Cohen's notes about that conversation.
Exactly. So we just don't know. And you heard the one quote of someone telling Sarah Murray today, who the bleep knows what Michael Cohen did all those years.
Right.
Pretty scary when the people closest to the president literally are staring into what appears to be a black hole to everybody but Michael Cohen and Donald Trump in their own minds.
This is a scary reality that campaign officials face with Trump, that White House officials have faced with Trump, and now lawyers and legal teams surrounded by Trump. All they have often to go on is what Trump tells them, his sort of version of the truth about what he did or didn't do, in this case with Michael Cohen, what kind of business Michael Cohen handled, what Michael Cohen knew about any international sort of foreign business dealings that Mr. Trump may have had, in his private business. As we know, Robert Mueller is looking, to some extent, at some of the financial dimensions of President Trump's business dealings during the campaign, the transition afterward. Michael Cohen, there's good reason to believe, knows quite a bit about that. So between the actual dealings that Trump had and then also just notes, as we know, Trump likes to call up a lot of people and ask for advice. What Michael Cohen may have taken down about things said during the transition, we don't know.
I mean, I think in conversations many of us have had with him, he's been very open about that. Well, before any of this, not in any threatening way, just that's what he did, right? You want to know what the boss wants, and he just rattles things off, and, you know,
but we don't know what's in those notes, and probably the legal team around President Trump knows that President Trump may not remember what he said to Michael Cohen.
And what do you make about this whole money thing, Harry? He's saying, you know, that the reason I want new lawyers is some sort of, I don't want to spend all the savings, is the reporting. Yet he's staying at a hotel. I mean, I guess we don't know who's paying for it or what rate he's getting, or, you know, I mean, there are unknowns, but it's one of the most expensive hotels in New York. It's $1,000 a night. He's been staying there since April 9th. You know, if you're running out of money, that's not money you'd be spending on a hotel room, it doesn't seem.
No, absolutely not. Although it is true that lawyers at this high level are expensive. And it's also true, just to be sort of crass about it, but it costs less in legal fees if you plead guilty and cooperate than it does to go through discovery and then face a lengthy, complicated trial.
Just because of the time.
Just because of the time. It shouldn't drive a decision, but occasionally it's a factor that a person has to think about. Do I really want to press this to trial? What would that do to my family? What are the risks in my sentence later on? These are the kinds of things that animate a decision to cooperate.
Laura, there's also the question here that whether Trump will testify before Mueller, as Evan was reporting, right? They started to have the conversation with him. They hadn't in a while. All right, let's go there again. Our Dana Bash spoke with Rudy Giuliani tonight. You know, look, Rudy changes what he has to say sometimes, but here's what he's saying tonight. Quote, I think he would like to testify in a situation in which we tell him it's fair and he's going to be received objectively. He continued to say he wants to carve out a way in which he can testify. Is there any situation under which Trump's legal team is going to tell him in advance, Laura, that this is going to be fair, given what Trump himself has said about Mueller?
I think they can tell him that, but certainly won't satiate the President of the United States, who's had a campaign as the President of the United States to undermine the credibility and call this a witch hunt, the entire FBI investigation, and specifically call out Robert Mueller. But again, what you're seeing here is all these caveats and contingency plans. We'd like to talk to you if only you can make guarantees to us, guarantees that no other defendant, subject, target, or witness will ever get. You have the same essential rights as everybody else. Either you're above the law or you're not. If you're above the law, you ask for things like guarantees that nobody else gets. It's unfair, it's hypothetical, and it's a fantasy that he'll get that.
All right. Thank you all very much. And next, breaking news. President Trump confronted about why he's praising accused killer Kim Jong-un, and he just answered the question this way.
But he's still done some really bad things.
Yeah, but so have a lot of other people done some really bad things.
Plus, why a prominent Republican now says the GOP is starting to resemble a cult. And only out front, two political operatives with ties to Trump's campaign now facing serious questions over their ties to Russia. Who are they? It include verification of denuclearization. Okay. I want to read the exchange between the secretary and reporters so you can hear exactly what he's saying for yourself, because it's important. So the first question, Mr. Secretary, I wanted to ask you about verifiable and irreversible. You said, the day before you said, it's our only objective. It's clear we want that. It's not in the statement. Why is it not in the statement? And the president said, the reporter continues, Secretary Pompeo then interjects, it is in the statement. It's in the statement. You're just wrong about that. Question, how is it in the statement? And the exchange goes back and forth, concluding with the secretary saying, you're just, because complete encompasses verifiable and irreversible. It's just, I suppose you could argue semantics, but let me assure you, it's in that document. He goes on to say, I find the question insulting and ridiculous and frankly ludicrous. I just have to be honest with you. It's a game, and one ought not play games with serious matters like this. Of course, we all agree with that. So let's just be clear here on the facts. This is the statement. The word verification is not in it. It simply is not there. That's a fact. You can look at it, you can zoom in, you can see it, you can check it yourself online. It is not there. And when you are talking about getting a country to give up nuclear weapons, a country that has promised to do so before and has broken that promise repeatedly, it is not a matter of semantics and does one general word actually include something that is extremely specific. Jim Acosta is out front. He was the television pool reporter for the Trump-Kim meeting. And Jim, you know, Pompeo is insulted. He's insulted. It's ludicrous to be asked why verification is not part of this signed agreement. You witnessed the summit firsthand. What do you make of what Pompeo said?
Well, Aaron, I think the Secretary of State is sensitive about this because they signed on to an agreement that essentially means they're going to make it up as they go along, that this is a work in progress. This is the beginning and not the end. And we got a sense of that yesterday or a couple of days ago, whatever day it was earlier this week when the president had that press conference and when he signed that agreement with Kim Jong-un. They obviously understand inside the White House that they have a big risk that they're taking here. The president is putting his credibility on the line, and that's why he said he may come back in 6 months and say this didn't work out. But I think Secretary Pompeo himself admitted that this is going to take 2 to 2.5 years to fully denuclearize North Korea. So this is a work in progress.
Now, the president tweeted this morning, Jim, that the biggest enemy of the United States is actually not something like a regime with nuclear weapons that has promised to annihilate the United States, not something in that realm. He actually said the press is the biggest enemy, tweeting, "So funny to watch the fake news, especially NBC and CNN. They're fighting hard to downplay the deal with North Korea. 500 days ago, they would have begged for this deal. Looked like war would break out. Our country's biggest enemy is the fake news so easily promulgated by fools." Now, you yourself, Jim, when you were in Singapore, came under fire by Trump allies for asking questions to Trump and Kim. And at one point, you and other reporters were asking questions during the signing of the statement. Let me just play that clip briefly.
We're starting that process very quickly. Very, very quickly. Absolutely.
Mr. President, 100%
You then asked Trump and Kim questions when they were on the balcony across from you, and I'll play a clip of that.
Mr. President, how's it going so far, sir?
Very good.
What do you think?
Very, very good. Excellent relationship. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chairman Kim, will you denuclearize?
Mr. Kim, will you give up your nuclear weapons, sir?
Right, again, you're there, so are others. That's how it goes. By the way, the president addressed you both times, but others close to him are slamming you. You know, saying you're the worst guy. You don't even deserve to be a reporter. You're being singled out.
Right.
What's your response to that?
My goodness, you know, there was a dictator just, you know, a few feet away from me at times. How could I not ask this man if he was going to give up his nuclear weapons? How could I not ask the president in those situations, are you making sure that this man is giving up his nuclear weapons? And so I think I was simply just trying to do what a reporter should do in those situations. And Aaron, you know, that's not my way to shout questions or try to get a question in. That's not your way. That's not CNN's way. It's the American way. And what I would say to the president's advisors and people who are going to hurl these kinds of insults at us, and even the president himself, is that, you know, attacking the press is not the American way. You know, asking dictators hard questions about nuclear weapons, that is the American way, and I'll do it again if I have the chance.
Right, and as you point out, it is the American way, and it is moments like that when you had all of those I don't want to use the word reporters, right, but people who work for the state media in North Korea, they're looking at all of you to see how you do your jobs, to see how you stand up to authority. It's a moment where our country can show part of what makes it so great.
That's right.
And it is pretty shocking that it is being slammed by those in the highest places in this land. Thank you so much, Jim.
You got it. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
And out front now, Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World, and former Army Commanding General for Europe and the 7th Army, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. Gordon, you're with me, so let me start with you. The Secretary of State says it's insulting, ludicrous, and ridiculous that anybody would ask about verification being in the statement because it's there. But it's not there.
It's not there, and the Secretary of State's words really just show the state of mind, how defensive he's become. You know, Pompeo is usually very open, pretty charismatic.
Yeah,
and this
pretty
time,
affable, frankly.
And affable.
Yeah.
And he's won applause for the way he's dealt with not only foreign leaders, but also everybody else. And this is just so striking. You know, this phrase is CVID. You know, the C is complete, and he says it's complete. The V is verifiable, but C is not V, and he should know that.
Right. I mean, it's a pretty basic thing, Mark, and yet defensive at the least would be the word. I mean, he's saying it's insulting that anyone would even ask why the word isn't there.
Yeah, I don't understand it either, Aaron. I mean, this is the kind of rigor and discipline that goes into these kinds of statements, and it also should be transparent to let people know what actually happened, and to have the disconnect between what the Secretary of State said versus what is actually in the document and also what the President's saying is somewhat disconcerting.
It is disconcerting, and I want to play something else that just happened and get your reaction to it, both of you. The president just spoke to Bret Baier on Fox News, literally just played, and I just want to play the clip here we have about what he said on North Korea. Here it is.
You know, you call people sometimes killers. He is a killer. I mean, he's clearly executing people.
He's a tough guy. Hey, when you take over a country, tough country, with tough people, and you take it over from your father, I don't care who you are, what you are, how much of an advantage you have. If you can do that at 27 years old, I mean, that's 1 in 10,000 that could do that. So he's a very smart guy. He's a great negotiator. But I think we understand each other.
But he's still done some really bad things.
Yeah, but so have a lot of other people done some really bad things. I mean, I could go through a lot of nations where a lot of bad things were done.
All right, just to be clear here, the UN says you have 120,000 North Koreans in political prisons, Gordon, in 2014, starvation, rape, torture. Kim himself has personally ordered the execution of 340 people, including his own half-brother, by poisoning in the Malaysia airport. We can go on and on. Anti-aircraft machine guns used to kill people. The UN actually, and I'll just read the exact quote here, when they talked about North Korea, this issue of other bad operators, the quote was, North Korean human rights violations do not have any parallel in the contemporary world. And yet Trump is saying, well, a lot of other people have done bad things too, and he's a good guy. He loves his people.
Yeah, well, that he loves his people is just incomprehensible.
Which is, of course, what he said at the press conference.
At the press conference Tuesday. And this is, again, a very difficult thing for people to accept what Trump has said. And the other thing that is so perplexing to me is that during the State of the Union message, Trump emphasized North Korean human rights. He brought the escapee who had been run over by the train. You know, he had done more about North Korean human rights than any of his predecessors, and yet he says something like that to Bret Baier. That just, to me, it doesn't compute, and I don't understand it. And the United States should be standing for human rights all the time, and we should not be giving excuses to people like Kim or anybody else.
Right. I mean, General, it is pretty stunning, right? And the president said he loves his people. He loves his people. At the press conference, we all remember Otto Warmbier, right, who came back essentially brain dead. President Trump, making big comments about that at the time. But now there's other bad guys out there. I mean, General, the president also described the military exercises between South Korea and the United States that have been going on for years as provocations and war games that are going to end and save a lot of money. Now, just to be clear, war games and provocations are not words that the United States or its allies uses to describe those. The word is exercises. Those are the words Kim Jong-un uses to describe them. What do you make of that?
Well, you can't, by definition, call something that's a defensive exercise, which is preparing for any kind of attack by North Korea into South Korea, which is it describes the various war plans that we have on the books. It's a defensive deterrent. That's not provocation. If anyone has been provocative, it has in fact been Kim Jong-un, since he has been in power on multiple occasions, as well as his father and as well as his grandfather. They have done multiple things that have provoked South Korea, killing people, killing Americans, killing South Koreans, invading their territory, downing ships, downing airplanes. So all of these things just seem strange, but it's also a word that has been used by other countries, provocative. Russia, China, and North Korea have all used that term in suggesting that we should stop defensive deterrent exercises in South Korea, which we always tell them we're going to do. There are always notifications long in advance.
Yes.
We state exactly what the exercise objectives are.
Right. They're like clockwork. And, of course, the president's words were, I wanted to stop the war games. I thought they were very provocative. It's a stunning statement from the President of the United States. Thank you both so very much. And next, one Republican calling out his own party when it comes to Trump today.
It's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it?
And a top Democrat with some shocking words about Jeff Sessions.
Sessions, he just loved, for black people to be in the back of the bus again.
Is that fair or going way too far? Congressman Gutierrez is out front tonight. Tonight, a cult. That's what a top Republican senator is calling his own party.
We're in a strange place. I mean, it's almost, it's becoming a cultish thing, isn't it? It's not a good place for any party to end up with a cult-like situation as it relates to a president that happens to be purportedly of the same party.
Purportedly of the same party. Trump, the cult leader. It comes as a top Trump critic in the GOP, Congressman Mark Sanford, who has won 6 races, never had an issue, lost in the primaries last night to a Trump supporter. Out front now, editor of TheResurgent.com, Eric Erickson, and our political commentator, Ben Ferguson, and radio host, thanks to both. Eric, the Republican Party, a bit of a cultish thing led by President Trump, purportedly the leader of the party, according to Corker.
Yeah, listen, there is this is what Republicans said about Democrats back from 2009 to 2013 with Barack Obama, or 2017, that there could be no criticism. Anyone who criticized him from within the party was challenged. I've been a Republican for a long time. I was critical of George W. Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney, even going back to Bob Dole, and never have seen the party turn on people critical. I mean, take Mark Sanford, for example. He left his wife and children, abandoned them to go to Argentina to take up with his mistress, came back, publicly apologized, left the governor's mansion, got elected to Congress. The voters kept electing him. He voted against Barack Obama. He voted against George W. Bush. He voted against Donald Trump. But then he began criticizing Donald Trump and is out of a job for criticizing him. All those other things.
So Colt is fair to you, Eric?
I think the Republican Party is headed that way, where they can't abide criticism of the leadership.
Ben? Colt?
Yeah, Eric, I love you, but come on. Colt, really? I mean, this is absurd. Bob Corker got more fired up yesterday as he was talking about his fellow Republicans and chastising them than he did during the entire 8 years when Obama was president. I've never heard Corker's voice get that high for that long when he's ever been running for office. And he's a bitter old man that the people of Tennessee said, we're going to vote you out of office because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. This actually is not that much to do with Donald Trump. Corker and others need to understand the reason why they're being drained out of the swamp is because they didn't do what they said they were going to do. Corker says he's going to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Ben, is it everything, as Lindsey Graham is saying, to do with Donald Trump, right? Because Corker isn't running for re-election for whatever reason. Take what you're saying at face value. It doesn't even matter. He's not running. So now he can come out and say what he really thinks.
But here's the thing. This is the part about Corker where he's just a flat-out fraud. I mean, this is a guy who is going to lose, so he doesn't run again. And he's a fraud because he didn't ever fight this hard when he actually had the power to make a difference and do change. So the voters said, we are done with you, and now he's acting like, and he's angry because he's losing power. I mean, this is the demise of a guy who had a lot of power in Washington,
but
had a lot of influence.
Fraud would imply that you think that he doesn't mean
gone.
what he says. It seems pretty clear to me he does mean what he says. Eric, do you think he means what he says?
Well, first, let's back up. I agree with everything that Ben just said about Bob Corker. He's absolutely right about Bob Corker. No love for Bob Corker there. But when a party can't abide criticism, they can abide Mark Sanford voting against the president. They just can't abide him speaking up critical of the president. I mean, the president, you mentioned this comment that he made to Brett Baer just a few minutes ago, that praising Kim Jong-un despite being a mass murderer and genocidal maniac, and no one in the party wants to speak up about that.
No, I mean, Brett Baer called him out. There have been a few people have tried to call him out about that, but there's been incredible silence on it. But that, along with the Access Hollywood tape, along with a lot of other things, Ben, there is clearly a fear among Republicans to speak out against the president.
Let's deal with Kim Jong-un, right? A perfect example. Why is the president not going in there like he was a year ago when he was talking? Remember, a year ago we were sitting here and people were saying Donald Trump's going to get us into World War III because of his rhetoric on North Korea.
But why were we saying that? We were saying that because why? Because Donald Trump was talking about fire and fury and the likes of which the world has never before seen. That's why people were talking about war because of Trump's
I wasn't here a year ago. I was on Fox and not allowed to criticize the president.
Let's be clear, though. You had a year ago where the president realized that rhetoric was not working and was not going to get us to peace. So he did a 180 on that. And now people are criticizing him for being nice to a guy that's trying to get him to denuclearize. You're never going to get a deal with anyone like Kim Jong-un if you're out there trashing him on all of these issues.
Well,
it doesn't mean that you're not brave enough to. It means you're smart enough not to do it.
A guy who murders his own people and has done things not seen in the contemporary world on evil and human rights is somehow loves his people. Okay, there's a line, and then there's crossing it. So,
but I don't
want to get into this Kim Jong-un fight again.
Hold on. If you have to, here's the thing about Donald Trump, and this is the part about Sanford and others that lost yesterday. They don't understand. Sometimes people look for leadership and realize that sometimes leadership means having to work with people you don't necessarily like and getting along with them. And Corker and Sanford and others, they might want to take a message from Donald Trump that you may not like the president, but it's better to work with him than to lose your seat in Congress by criticizing him.
Eric, can I just play some of what Sanford said about Trump, which, by the way, he says he doesn't regret, and he'd say it all again. He doesn't care that he lost because of it, but here's what he said.
It doesn't make anybody's day when the President of the United States says, I want to take you out. But what I would say is, I don't work for him. When the President says to somebody in an audience, I wish I could hit you in the face. If not, why don't you do it and I'll pay your legal fees? We ought to call it for what it is. That's a problem. I think a lot of people would say, okay, the guy said something stupid. I think a lot of people, were disappointed with the way he said it and what he said.
So, Eric, does this mean even fewer people are going to criticize the president?
Oh, I think so. Until we get to a lame duck Congress after November, then you may see Republicans temporarily grow a spine for a few months. And this is the problem. Listen, I think you should be able to criticize within your own party. And I remember that many of the Republicans now praising President Trump for going and reaching out to Kim Jong-un were just 2 years ago attacking Barack Obama for reaching out to the Cuban president. In fact, Mercedes Slapp, one of the communications leaders of the White House, tweeted out at the time
Cuba didn't have nuclear
what's
weapons.
next.
Cuba didn't have nuclear weapons.
But Ben, listen, this doesn't matter.
It's different.
Can you
can't
not criticize the President of the United States as a Republican? No, I don't think you can. I agree with much of what you say about it. But listen, the problem here, Ben, is that Republicans in the United States have a President of the United States who's coddling a dictator who ruthlessly murders his own people, and he goes on national television on Fox, by the way, where, again, you're not allowed to abide criticism of dear leader, much like in North Korea oftentimes, and he goes on and he says that this guy, he took over from his father. Of course he's going to be like this. He doesn't want to take criticism of from the people, from the Republicans
Sanford
to the
lost
president.
because he didn't listen to his own constituents.
Yes,
Corker
you're
didn't run for
absolutely
re-election.
right.
He didn't
And
listen
what
to
did he
his
not
own
listen
constituents.
to?